Welcome back. Let's discuss one of Nigeria's biggest problems, which of course is electricity. Now, as part of a broader push to enhance off-grid power solutions across the country now, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission now says it has granted permits to MTN Communications Nigeria Limited, Golden Penny Power Limited, Haven Hill now Synergy, and other companies for mini-grid electricity generation. Furthermore, the NEC has certified 6 meter service providers now during the quarter, including 4-meter installers and 2-meter manufacturers. These permits will allow developers to construct, operate, maintain, and where applicable, own mini-grids with distribution capacities above 100 kilowatts and generation capacities of up to 1 megawatt. Now, this licenses mandate the generation and distribution of electricity from designated sites with an obligation to serve customers who request service. In a statement by the Commission now, NEC says it has continued to encourage the development and utilization of renewable energy by issuing permits and registration certificates for mini-grid development. Joining me now from Port Harcourt to discuss all of this is the Executive Director of NEPA No Wahala, Emeka Ojoko. Mr. Ojoko, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Just how significant is this development, especially for our perennial electricity challenge in this country?
Well, it's a good development. Sometime last year, NEC passed an amendment to the existing mini-grid regulations. The first one was passed in 2016 and it was outdated. But this regulation that was passed in December last year basically created a more flexible regime for NEC to grant licenses, mini-grid licenses to designated companies for them to provide electricity to underserved areas, primarily the rural areas. Okay, the significance is this, that most of the discos will not typically extend service to the rural areas because of the low returns that they get from those areas. Okay, low returns in terms of the tariffs that people in those areas are willing to pay, and the absence of industries in those areas that would serve as a backbone for their revenue generation. So because of that, rural areas are underserved. The REA has been most responsible trying to get power supply to those areas. But with this new regulation now, mini-grid permit holders are allowed to now set up their plants in these underserved areas and then negotiate with them for tariffs that those areas are willing to pay, right? Unlike what we have with the discos, where the tariffs are set by NEC, okay, and for those who are on the band A tariff will be crying right now at the exceedingly high rates that we are paying for power supply. But with the mini-grid holders, they are allowed to negotiate with the host with their customers and then agree on a rate for them to supply power to them. Now, I need to make these points here quickly that the permit granted to MTN is not a mini-grid permit. The permit that was given to them was to set up captive generating plant. Okay, that means that they're supplying they are generating power for their own consumption
for their cell sites or something.
Sell to consumers, yes, not to sell to consumers. But the ones granted to Golden Penny is for mini-grid operations, which would allow them to sell to consumers at rates that they can negotiate with the consumer as lesser than what, well, let me not say lesser, but we hope that it will be less than what those consumers typically would pay to the discos that would ordinarily cover those states.
You look at this solution in the long term, you think it's the most viable to solving Nigeria's perennial electricity challenge?
Well, it's one of many, right? It's one of many solutions that the government has to come up with to solve this problem. Okay, the Nigerian electricity industry is hydra-headed. Okay, it's hydra-headed. The sector right now, the primary problem is lack of liquidity. Okay, there's high debt that's been owed in the value chain, and the discos operations are in terms of collections are so poor. Okay, they are so poor. The discos are posting abnormally high collections losses, and once the discos are not able to generate enough money, enough revenue to serve the value chain, then the problem begins to develop. So there are different solutions that the government has to come up with. One of which they have tried to do now in terms of implementing what they call a cost-reflective tariff. But then that has thrown up a whole new set of problems, right? For the people who are on Band A, the Band A customers, they are enjoying more stable power supply. But there are some customers who are on Band A who, even though they are enjoying improved supply, they really cannot afford this tariff. You've seen examples with the universities that are complaining. Okay, our hospitals are complaining. So as I said, it's a Hydra-headed solution. The government has to boost generation capacity. We've heard the minister who's talking about that we'll be able to hit 5,000 megawatts, and it's been celebrated. But 5,000 megawatts cannot serve the Nigerian population. It's still far below what we need. Okay, all the generating the gencos that we have in Nigeria, they have an installed capacity right now of about 13,000 megawatts, and we have not even been able to to evacuate up to half of the installed capacity. And this 13,000 megawatts is still insufficient to meet our industrial needs. I'm seeing reports again on the papers about the minister complaining about the manufacturing companies, industries going into self-generation. Essentially what you're talking about here, getting these permits to generate their own power for their own needs and then staying off the grid. And the minister is trying to get them back on the grid. If the industries stay off the grid, the discos cannot be profitable, because in any electricity sector, it is the industries that serve as the revenue backbone. They are the ones who can utilize massive amounts of power. And when they take this power, right, it helps to now bring down the cost for the commercial and residential customers. But we have ourselves in a situation that, right, now, where these industries have been placed on Band A. Band A is the highest tariff in the industry.
Yes.
In other countries, you find that power supply to your mass consumer, to the industries, that power is subsidized, right? They pay lesser than what the other consumers pay because they use more. In any economy, when there is high demand, it's supposed to bring down price. But in Nigeria, we have a situation where those who use the most amount of electricity are billed higher than those who use lesser. We have an abnormality there, right, which is now forcing these high consumers to go source their own supply by themselves. And when they are doing that, the backlash is that the other consumers who don't have the capacity to take off this 5,000 megawatts that we are currently evacuating, they cannot pay for that power.
This is the point. This is the point.
The liquidity problem continues to linger because of.
So this is the point then, and I appreciate you for bringing this up. So the question to ask is, look, we want increased and improved power supply, but the question is, can we actually afford it? And I'm happy you talked about Band A customers. I mean, affordability is a very big issue. Now the power is there, but affordability is now a very big issue. For a very long time, we've been crying that we do not have power. Now we have it, but can we afford it? So the question is, our problem, is it about really not having enough power, or having it and not being able to afford it?
Well, as we've seen with the Band A customers, right, we can actually distribute enough power for people to have 24-hour power supply. The solution to the cost of power coming down is revenue assurance, right? The reason the tariffs are so high is because of the losses that are being experienced in the sector. When the losses are minimized, the tariffs come down, right? The way the electricity market is structured all around the world. Are you able to hear me clearly, sir?
Yes, very well. Go ahead.
Yes. The way the electricity markets are structured, right? Now, when ATC&C means aggregate technical, commercial, and collections losses. When the ATC&C losses are high, the tariffs are high because the market is structured in a way that the distribution companies, the generating companies, the market system operators, they need to the revenue that comes in needs to be enough to take care of operating costs and then also provide them with a reasonable profit margin. So when, let's say, 20% of what they evacuate is what comes in, the money they get for that 20% is enough to cover 100%. So when there are losses of 80%, the revenue that comes in for that 20% has to cover that 80% loss. So that's why the tariffs are high, because they must compensate for the ATC&C losses. So when the sector becomes more efficient, when distribution becomes more efficient, and when those losses are drastically reduced, then it brings the tariffs down. So our problem now, which the government is trying to attack now, is ensuring that we have 100% metering. Once we have 100% metering in the system, then this high bills that we are paying now will start to come down gradually. Okay, until we see ourselves in a more situation where we can have 20 to 24 hours power supply in a year and then still be able to afford it. But for now, because of the high losses that have been experienced in the sector, then these tariffs will be as high as they are currently in order to ensure that the discos still make enough, the GENCOs still make enough so that the grid does not go completely down.
And this is something that is difficult for some people to understand, because the impression being given is that, look, these discos they're ripping off their customers, and you know, before now the complaint had been that, look, there's no power, and now power is available, but affording it now it becomes a big issue.
Let me liken this to what happened in the telecom sector, right? When MTN and the rest of them came online. Initially, we were paying, how much was it? Was it 50 naira per minute? Right?
Yeah.
50 naira per minute. And even if it was just 1 second, right, that you made a call and you have a drop call, you still pay that 50 naira.
That's true.
Right? Now, the reason that was so high, because they to keep it so high, because these guys needed to recoup their investment, right? So they allowed them to charge us that much. I remember the Triumph handset bought then, which if you dash me now, I wouldn't take it. But I remember the amount of money that these things were going for them, because they were just starting up, and startup costs, right, are always very high. But over time, and with increased competition, the tariffs, the cost of calls came down. Till now, where we are all able to make calls, and we're all talking about telecom sector being perfect. Well, not perfect, but being more better than it used to be, right? So we are in the same kind of setting here, right? We are, despite the fact that we privatized the sector in 2013, right, and put all these discos on board, but all we created were more or less 11 monopolies. Call it 11 MTNs, right? 7, 4 states each. So as long as this monopolistic structure continues, then we will not see an improvement in service. But gradually we are seeing where competition is being introduced in the sector. We've seen some states being given the right to control and regulate their own electricity market. Now, what this means is that these states can now license other distribution companies to start generating and distributing power within their states. So competition is coming into the sector gradually. Now, when these companies now start competing for market share, for them, a quick win will be to, okay, how do we get customers to migrate to our own network? Is by offering them more efficient power at lesser rate. So what you're going to start seeing now is once these companies are now licensed, you will now see that they start going around canvassing for customers. Hey, come on board my network. We're going to give you light and so and so and so. So we start enjoying these things more. But until this monopolistic structure is completely removed from the setting, and then we now have multiple distribution companies or multiple retail companies with the EA of the Electricity Act of last year has now created, where we can have both distribution and then supply being distinct segments in the sector. So you can have multiple retailers selling electricity to consumers, right? And then for them, the quick win, what to pull you in is lesser, more affordable pricing, and then more regular power supply. So if only we can be patient, we will see the difference in a few months, a few years. But generally, we can see that on a policy note, the government is making the right moves in terms of introducing competition to the sector, in terms of what they've just done now to allow these mini grid operations, and then liberalizing it in a way that the grid operators are not mandated to charge the same rates that the discos are charging. They can negotiate with their customers and agree with them on what to pay. And of course, you know that with this off-grid licenses, before they will connect you to the network, they must put a meter for you.
Yes.
Right? Because they want to be sure that they are getting their money back. It must be fully metered. So none of those customers in those areas will complain that they are being shortchanged because the meter is recording your supply. Okay, so looking forward, right? I think that if the government maintains loyalty to the policies they put in place, right, so that investors can looking at Nigeria can say, okay, we are on the right track.
Just before I let you go, one final question. The Minister of Power recently said, appealed to bulk electricity users, like industries, for instance, to come back, who had disconnected from the grid now, to come back. So some of them actually disconnected because they found the grid unreliable. But now the minister is saying, look, things have improved, there's reliability, and that they should come back, that they can't continue to rely on captive power, which is quite expensive. What have you got to say about that?
They have to make it attractive for them. They must make it attractive for them. Because before a heavy user will go off the grid, they've done their cost-benefit analysis. They've looked at what the cost of captive generation is in terms of setting up their plants, and then factored it in to a 5-year, 10-year period. And they've looked at it and said, look, in the long run, if we put this thing in place, it's cheaper for us than being on public supply. So they go off. Businesses don't plan with 1 year. They plan 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And they've looked at the cost and say it's better for us to stay on captive generation. So for this heavy users to come back on the grid, you can't be charging them the same rates that you charge your regular consumers. In any business, when you have somebody who is a high user of your service, you give the person discounts. Even in your business, if your regular customers, those whose advert revenue contribute to your revenue base, you give them discounts as a way of encouraging them to stay on with you. But if you're charging them the same rates as you're charging those who use how many kilowatts hours in a month, then what sense does it make for them? They stay where they are. So they have to have a plan, right, to make it cheaper for them to come back on the grid than to remain on their captive generation plants. And as I said, all over the world, apart from in Nigeria, as far as I'm aware, industrial customers pay a lower rate than commercial and residential customers. They pay lower rates. Why? Because the government has an interest in this industrial concerns doing well. When they're able to make more profits, they're able to contribute more to the GDP of the states in which they operate and of the country in general, when they are more profitable. So the government of the day has to give them discounts that can make their operations profitable, so they can now have its spillover effects on the rest of the economy. Or make it difficult for them to remain in business when their operating costs are so high. Then cost of goods and services in the market will remain at an abnormally high level. So my advice to the minister is to give them a discounted rate, please. They can't be paying the same rate as regular Band A customers. It won't work.
I get your point. Emeka Ojoko, the executive director, of NEPA Wahala NG. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks a lot. All right, we'll take a short break now, but we'll be right back. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
When you go into public office, you must be ready to answer to the people.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, and use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.